Now we will talk about error handling in SQL Server 2000. Okay. So since we don't have the SQL Server 2000, my version is I think it's 2012, and I think yours is also the same. We will try to do the same things in this 2012 version. Okay. So what is new in 2005? There is something called try-catch blocks. Okay. What does this mean? First, I'll try to explain it to you in a short, like in simple language. So basically, if you try to execute something, and if you put that into try-catch block, with first tries to do it, and if there's an error, it goes back to the catch block. Okay. So instead of doing it right away, it first tries doing it. And if it fails, instead of failing, it will go to the catch block. Okay?
Yeah.
And there's something called double error, and then it was in 2000, in 2005, and later we have try catch. So the note is sometimes system functions that begin with two @ signs are called global variables. If you remember the temporary tables, we had one hashtag and double hashtag. If it was one
temper tables and local temper tables.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the same thing. If we have one @ sign, it's local variable, and if you have double @ sign, it's global variables. But actually, they're not variables and do not have the same behaviors as the variables. Instead, they are very similar to functions. So basically, we have also this system functions, right? Like system aggregate functions or date time functions like getDate or index, substring. These are all system functions, right? Double error function, I mean variable, more like a function than a variable. Okay, even though it has this @ sign, it is not really a variable, but it's more of a function. Okay, and then what we have after this 2005 raise error. This is we just saw, right? Like in the exception handling. This is what exception handling is. Like basically what exception handling is, if there is something wrong or an error, we have to stop executing and then state what happened or what should happen. Okay. This is like a part of probably I would say like debugging or maybe. Okay. You debug your code, you come across many scenarios, what could happen in real life, right? And then you have to adjust your code accordingly. Okay. You have to take into account every possible scenario. Let's imagine like you have this application, right? Like say if you want to sign up for email account and they will ask you some fields, right? Like we'll ask your name, your birth date, and the email address that you want to use and all that. So that each field ideally should be exception handled. That means, for example, instead of inserting date of birth, if somebody tries to insert a word or a string, right?
Yeah.
If you don't do exception handling, for example, with like we have the check constraint, right? So that check constraint is actually an exception handling for a field. Okay, it basically checks, and then if this value that's being inserted is not valid, it will of raise this error. Okay.
Yeah.
So there is exception handling everywhere. Okay. So you have to think of every scenario. If you don't do that check constraint, anyone can insert invalid data into your database. Okay. Therefore, this exception handling is very important in order to keep your database data clean, integrated, and consistent. Okay.
Yeah.
This is error severity and an error state. Severity level 16, as I saw, as just told you, it indicates general errors that can be corrected by the user. Okay? In our case, we just said, okay, this is an invalid department name. So try to insert a valid department name. This means the user can actually correct this error, right? Okay. And then state equals the number between 1 and 255. And the raise error only generates errors with state from 1 through, let's see what this is. It's just a second. I want to see that number. $127. Okay. Okay. Now let's continue. Now let's take a look at this double add error exception handling method. So double add error, it usually returns a non-zero value. Okay. If there is an error. Otherwise, indicating that the previous SQL statement encountered no errors. That means if this error, add error, we call it variable, but it's more of a function. If this error returns something that's not equal to 0, that means there was an error.
Yeah.
Okay. If there was no errors, it will return 0. Okay. So basically, if the value for this double add error variable is 0, that means it's good. There was 0 errors. Okay.
Yeah.
If it's not 0, that means there was some sort of error. Okay. And there's a note that this error is cleared and reset on each statement execution. Check it immediately following the statement being verified or save it to a local variable that can be checked later. Okay. Now let's see this in action. The first thing, let me save this. Second. Okay. Now let's check this. See that in action. Okay. First thing you have to understand, this is global variable. Okay. What the global means is it is visible across all the instances of SQL Server and all whatever you have it open. Okay. Basically means you can access this variable in this or any of these windows. Okay. And we know that variable is something that holds a value for short period of time, for temporary time. Okay. So this variable this returns 0, okay, if no error, okay, and non-zero value if there is an error, okay. And also one more thing to note, that it will be cleared after each SQL statement execution.
Yeah.
Okay, that means you have to use it right away or you'll lose it. Just like in the CTEs or derived tables, you have to select or do whatever you want from that CTE right after that CTE, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise it wouldn't be recognized. So this variable gets a new value each time any SQL statement is executed. And the value it holds is either 0 or non-zero.
Yeah.
Okay. If this variable has a value of 0, it means your previous SQL statement was correct and there was no errors. And if it's not equal to 0, it means your previous SQL statement had some issues, had some errors. So that's where we use this variable. You need to check this variable against 0 to see if your previous SQL statement had errors or not. Okay? Okay, now let's see that in action. So in here, what they're trying to do to build product values, this and that. If error, print this, else print no errors. Okay. Now we'll do the same thing. Insert, we'll try to set into, all right, let's try something else. Create table A. If, and now obviously this statement is, it gives an error, right? Now if that gives an error, that means this variable should equal to 0, right? Okay. So if this, I mean, it shouldn't be equal to 0, basically. Well, we'll check both conditions. What we're saying is if this variable is not equal to 0, okay, that means if it's not equal to 0, that means there was some error, right? We will print error. Else means if this was equal to 0, right? Okay. It can only have two types of values, either 0 or not 0. So that's what we're saying. If this is not equal to 0, then say error. Else means the second and the only condition, which means it's equal to 0. If it's equal to 0, that means it was all good, right?
Yeah.
Print all good. Okay. I'll try to execute this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if print, we can see it on the bottom.
Yeah, it prints it like this. Okay. See if I execute this, I'll get this error. Okay. I'll get the actual error, and then I'll get this message also. Now let's try to insert. What do we have there? So we have 4. So now let's actually insert number 5. And for the department, let's say admin. Okay. Now let's try to execute this.
Yeah.
It's saying all good, basically. One row got affected, and it's all good because basically what happened is this statement didn't have any errors. Okay, that means this part was passed. Basically, if it didn't have any errors, the value for this is 0, right? If the value for this is 0, then it means there is no error. This part got executed, which is else. If it's not equal to 0, then print this. Else, meaning if it's 0, print. Okay. So this is a very basic, simple exception handling.
Yeah.
What we're doing is here, we're just basically customizing the message. Okay.
Yeah.
We're not actually taking any further action. Okay. So that is what this double add error variable does. Right?
So we do it just to customize the message.
Yeah. Well, actually, after that, you could also add print else and then else and then return. If you say return, yeah. Well, actually, yes. In this case, even if you said return, it wouldn't be able to put this back, right? Because it's already inserted. And if you say even return, it returns until here.
Yeah.
This will still be inserted, okay? For that, I will show you, like we will cover some other exception handling methods now. There, you can actually do something about it. But here, we're only customizing the message. Okay. Okay, so insert into this. At this point, error will have a non-zero value selected. At this point, error because the select statement is successfully executed, and this and this and that. Okay. Okay. This is the function. Declare error. Like what we're trying to do here is, since the error, this variable changed its value right after this previous statement, and it's cleared for every statement. Right? If I execute some other statement now, it's cleared and it gets the value again. Okay.
Yeah.
So if I want to use this previous value, I can actually save this value into another variable that you can create, and then save this into another variable so you can use it even further. Okay? Otherwise, you cannot use it further because it gets cleared every time.
Yeah.
For that, this is how you do it. You declare another variable. Okay. And then you do your whatever statement is, and then you set that new variable equal to this variable, okay? So basically now the value of this variable comes and sits in this newly declared variable. And then I can simply use another statement or whatever I want to use, and then I can use that, okay, new variable, and check for errors there. If I did not save the value of this variable in this new variable, I couldn't have executed this next select star from TBL product, because if I execute this, the value for this would change. Okay? Because it gets cleared each time a new statement is executed. Then the value for this would change, and then I wouldn't be able to use for example, use the same value, because now the value is different from here. But if I save this before I do this select statement, if I save it in here, this doesn't change, right? I can use the same value after this second select statement also.
Yeah. If
Yes. So because this gets cleared every time, can save it somewhere else so I can use it further.
Yeah.
So why do I want to do that? Because if there's an error, obviously I want to say error occurred. And if there's no error, I also want to select everything.
Yeah.
Okay, from this product. I try to insert, it will show an error. And then after that, it will select this TBL product and then print there was an error. And then it will just select the current status of this table. Okay? Okay. Let's, oh, looks like that's it for this add error. And now let's do error handling in 2005 and 8. Just a second. So now we'll continue the error handling. So now that double add error variable was in 2000. And now we're moving to 2004 and later versions. And what kind of error handling options do we have, basically? Okay. So after 2005 and later versions, we have this is the previous thing. We have something called try catch block or syntax. Okay? So yeah, what this means is it first tries something. If something happens, like error happens, it jumps to catch block. Okay. If everything is good, it stays in the try block. I will show that in action. That way you can, I guess it would make more sense. But for now, let's read the concept. So any set of SQL statements can possibly throw an exception are wrapped between begin try and end try blocks. If there is an exception in the try block, the control immediately jumps to the catch block. If there is no exception, catch block will be skipped. Statements after the catch block are executed. Okay? So, and then errors trapped by a catch block are not returned to the calling application. If any part of the error information must return to the application, the code in the catch block must do so by using raise error function. In the scope of the catch block, there are several system functions that are used to retrieve more information about the error that occurred. These functions return null if they are executed outside the scope of the catch, and so on. So now see that. Let's try to see that in action. Okay. If you take a look at this, we have this begin try, end try, begin catch, end catch. So does this mean? I will put this try, catch, syntax. Basically, you can actually write anything that can cause an error inside this try and catch blocks. So the syntax is you say begin try, end try, begin catch, okay, and then end catch. This is the general syntax, and you can put your whatever statement in here. For example, let's try this thing again. Okay. Now let's say we will insert number 6 and then the department will be sales. Okay. So what happens now is this will execute, and then it will start trying. Well, basically, it will try executing this statement. Okay? And if everything is good, then it's good. But if there is any error, okay, it will jump to this catch block. Catch block, it will jump to this catch block and execute whatever is in this catch block. Okay. Let's say raise error again, and then the say there was error 16.1. Okay, and that's it. So now, basically what happens now is, if everything is fine here, it will execute this. And if something happens, it will stop executing this and jump to catch block. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It will throw you this error. Okay? Whatever is specified here. Okay? And then it will stop, like it doesn't do anything. 0 rows are affected.
Yeah.
Basically what happened is, this try catch means first SQL Server will try to execute whatever you have, and if it succeeds, if everything is good, it will execute that, and then that's it, good. If it fails, it will immediately jump into this catch block, okay? And then execute whatever is inside this catch block.